So as we get settled, hey, let's just give a round of applause again. And perhaps as a heuristic and just a device for the reasonable thing to do at the end of Sunday and the end of this summit is a way of kind of structuring our kind of thinking here. Feel free to ask the folks questions, but also, you know, as it's about plausible art worlds, I encourage us to kind of, in our questioning or answering, to try to think about suggestions for the production of a plausible world in and of itself. So you think that's fine, folks?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to go straight to questions. Oh, I see. It's right there.
So first off, I thought all of those projects rocked. I really loved seeing them. Thank you, and hearing about them. But I think it's a really interesting choice to put the institutional critique segment and the theoretical framing of plausible art worlds back to back, because it seems that they're somewhat contradictory, maybe even oppositional. So Andrea Fraser cautioned us about the dangers of increasing atomization and fragmentation. So my question is, what's up with the S? What's the benefit of saying that there's multiple art worlds rather than identifying as the art world, that we shape and define it? So why cede this territory? Isn't it self-marginalizing?
I'll say something about that. The logic of the attention economy would have it that not only should art be as visible as possible, not only should it be visible, it should be as visible as possible. And artists should do everything they can to attain the highest level possible within that reputational and attentional economy. And what we observed, I guess this is the reason why we wanted to start this project, is that, in fact, while that was going on the one hand, there were increasingly dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of artists, or professionally trained artists, who were just deciding to quit that reputational economy and that mainstream art world, and appeared to be doing other things. And as they disappeared into a sort of a shadow economy, we wanted to observe what was going on and why that was happening. I wouldn't say that it was actually a kind of fragmentation. Fragmentation implies that there was at one time a very cohesive whole, which then somehow shattered. I would say it's more of a constellation. These people are, and speaking for myself, are not, there's no antagonism, I would say, or no articulated antagonism with the mainstream art world. You know, we like to go to the exhibitions, we read their organs of publicity from time to time, and we keep up to date on what the mainstream's up to, but it's just not the most interesting place to be, and it's much more interesting to inject skills and de-skilling into other walks of human endeavor, I would say.
Do the other panelists feel they're part of an art world or a part of a worlds?
Hello? Okay. One of the things that often troubles me, and Stephen had mentioned near the end of the intro, that there's going to be an ongoing focus on art words, and collectively trying to come up with better, not just better terms, as NATO published this great glossary that a lot of artists, activists have been referring to. But we also need terms that specifically about the environments that we set up, not only to make art in and to be artists, but also that help us to understand art, these art worlds. I think the thing is, often without seeing art worlds in plural, what ends up happening is there's a recognized dominant force, and then there's something other. We're other. And always these endeavors that are considered to be other are they're always defined by the thing that they're either fighting against or trying to ignore or whatever. But that's not always the case. A lot of the, there's an indisputable number of practices that I think adhere in many ways to Andrea's wish fulfillment. The idea of people leading kind of these separate institutions or separate cells with their own agendas. Some of them occupy institutions. Some people who we definitely consider allies are not just allies in this, inside institutions, existing institutions are not just allies because they're helping us to rise up within the ranks of those, or helping us to gain notoriety, which I guess a panel like this could do too. But because they're supporting different kinds of practices, not just in artwork, but an entire sustaining environment that artists are involved in making. And so we see that pluralizing to be a very powerful force for us conceptually.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to get a question up here.
Did you want to respond to that first?
Did you want to?
I was just going to add that, the plausibility of the art world also invites those who do not identify themselves as artists. The art world means you must be an artist. If you do not identify as an artist, but rather, okay, maybe I'm an artist, maybe plausibly I can be an artist, or the alternative creative practice as plausibly connected with an art world, I think that's more inviting.
Actually, I think that my question follows well on the heels of that. My name is Anna. My question for you guys, and it's really been burning a hole in my pocket all day, has been not just what are the plausible art worlds that we are a part of, but why do you choose the art world? And I think that many people today would consider themselves not artists or simply activists, and they really have the agency to choose where they show up, what panels they speak on, different kinds of conferences that they participate in. And earlier this morning, Lori Jo, I think, said that artists are uniquely suited to do this kind of work, this socially engaged work. And my question to her and to you would be not just why are artists uniquely suited to do this work, but why is the art world uniquely suited to absorb the kinds of work that you're doing? And I think that's really relevant, and we should spend some time on that question.
I like the last part. It's good to affirm your question.
I just happen to have an MFA, so that I utilize a skill that I have gained and the knowledge I have for this project. I don't think the art world is uniquely needy of the kind of work we do. I think the world is, every world, and I will go anywhere, to any world, who will invite me to talk about this. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I entirely agree, but I think that the question which you raise is one which we've raised now 40 weeks in a row. It's rare that we have one of our potlucks where that kind of a question doesn't come up. And I think that Plausible Art Worlds is largely about trying to imagine more substantive integration between art worlds and life worlds. And in fact, it is life worlds which we're interested in. But art has undergone a very strange and very unique ontological destiny. In other words, and I think it's unique in that no other walk of human activity or any kind of other symbolic configuration has ever had this happen to it, is that art now can have a double ontological status. It can both be what it is, like a garbage collection agency or a house painting business or you name it, and the proposition of a garbage collection agency, a house painting business, and you name it. So, and I was quite struck, and I don't think I was the only one, yesterday when Claire Pentecost said that the reason for introducing art into all these other places is because art is the place where questions of value can be raised, and we sure need to be raising some questions of value. And it's for that reason that we think that the art world may be a particularly heuristic place for that kind of activity when it's combined with a self-understanding as art, although it may be, on the other hand, also the real thing.
Yeah, Dimitri, go ahead.
I actually wanted to ask a question, because I may be a little bit problematized, because I would like to ask a question to you. What is the relation between these different worlds? Because it looks a little bit like it's kind of peaceful coexistence of whatever nice, you know? And I don't think, because what you come up with that idea that there is some devil-like mainstream culture, how you relate, because actually I would answer on my side, because there is a big fight, you know, and actually it's a fight over hegemony. And right now I think the line of political separation, it's again the same line between Marxists and anarchists. Some still stuck into old-fashioned hegemonical politics that I think insist very important, and others say any claim to hegemony are dangerous, they are totalitarian and blah, blah, blah. So I think that in your configuration, I think it's missing something, because they're not all equal. There is different structures of power and different struggles, and you are not articulating them, and it's missing here. So something like that.
We've heard from some of the artists, and especially the regional reporters, about sort of the status of the international art world and how all of this discourse applies there, or how it's functioning in practice. But I think Dimitri brought up a very valid point, and I want him to sort of continue and talk a little bit more about what it means to not have institutions, and what it means to continue to sort of make institutions in regions of the world, taken into consideration some of the discussions that have happened here about the critique of institutions, plausible art worlds, when it doesn't seem sometimes that you can have a plausible art world in some countries.
Okay, good. I'm so glad you continued the question, because I realized I didn't give anyone a chance to answer it. So we'll just...
I just wanted to speak a little bit more about what he started talking about, sort of the not having any institutions to dismantle, I think is what you said. I don't know, maybe I misunderstood it, but if you can speak a little bit about it.
You want to hear specifically from Dimitri?
From Dimitri, please.
Oh.
I'm sorry, sometimes I have difficulties in understanding you speak here. You know, we get used to participate in European conference where we use very special version of English. And with you, I'm a little bit afraid that I'm not fully understand your question. So because you would like that earlier. I would elaborate on my comment on institution. So that's how we build counter institution. Yes. Because actually I think what is really at stake, particular in this cultural ideological fight, and it's really right now it's important, because the matter how future will develop right now unfortunately is not really happening in migrant slum cities or somewhere. That's happening here. That how we shape this subjectivity of the people. And actually with our amazing power of this big institutional machine, we really managed to reach quite big audience. And young people and students at educating. It's really very important things, I think. And it's our privileged position brings upon us very strong social responsibility. So I don't want to fool around and say that I'm equal to all the people who unfortunately haven't that privilege to have a free time, education, possibility to travel. And so for me, it's really important how we, artists, intellectuals, disseminate certain form of knowledge and participate in this cultural fight. So for me, it's really still old topic of the struggle. And it's not innocent at all. And it's not coexistence. It's not about that. It's really like a battle. You know, we are very much into Gramscian position, because right now it's not revolutionary situation, it's a war of position. But we should take it really seriously. And don't pretend that in this situation there is a special zone where we can reach kind of nice justice area. Sorry. Capitalism is not about justice. It's about something else. So, of course, we must try to do our best to eliminate these brutal injustices. But at the same time, as long as we, as an artist, stop imagining the world differently, I think our project is a failure. So, not failure in a nice Federico sense, like not error, but a failure, you know. So it's a long talk. I'm not sure that I can elaborate a little bit more. But I think particularly, as I said, in different situations, like in Buenos Aires or in Russia or in Balkans or in Latin America, there is a special task of bringing about new institutions that constructed totally different and in a clash with official institution of power. And then you can build alliances, build different form of relations to the power, but at the same time, you must pursue your own goals and your own mission. That is the key issue, I think.
But I think it's not true to say that there is some sort of embedded normativity in our year-long inquiry towards peaceful coexistence. In fact, I would be much more inclined, based on the evidence which we've accumulated, is that there is a fundamental antagonism between the worlds, which were
worlds collide. For sure.
Worlds do not mesh; they run up against each other, and that's as it should be. Which is why, as the horizon is not to develop a language so that we can all speak together and achieve some sort of consensus. It's what we're interested in really is looking in these very dramatic situations which you've named, looking at what types of structures people are imagining, what they're putting together in order to bring about this type of change that you want to. But we go about it in a kind of in a non-secular sort of way. So we're looking also in situations where there's much less dramatic social violence, let's say. I mean, there is, but it's not dramatic the way it would be, let's say, in contemporary Russia. And so in that sense, we're not being it's sort of ecumenical. But I don't think it's true that we are at the end of the day saying, oh yeah, it's just we vilified the mainstream, but there's all these really nice, generous projects out there that are all getting along happily ever after. Absolutely not. There's no evidence at all from any of our discussions that that's the case, or why we would want it to be the case.
Okay, I want to just get to it. I think you had a question here. Yeah.
Yes. I would like to offer a word to contribute with a word for you guys, and it's the artivist. The artist activist. So I think that could be helpful. So there we go for the errorists too.
I think we can create different words, but nothing happens. Art world is a bubble, and it's really, really difficult to be inside and then have some contact with the real society. When you are inside, then you forget we count audience. We understand sometimes the only place for art is museum, but artivism. Why? We have to fight a lot to defend we are artists, because the artivists they pay less to the artivist than the artist. So that is no. To be honest, I was invited many times as artivist. And then I saw the cash of one and the other guy and say, why? Let me use the name artist because it's better for me.
It's part of our vocabulary, right?
Olga would like to say something.
I should say that we are doing art politically, our group. And we have a lot of projects when we can't find a border between art and life and such things, But 2 years ago, we decided that it's not enough. And we decided to use another language for our art, for our art activity, I should say. And you see, our musicals, they are very spectacular. And I think it's very useful politically, because I see it works, it functions, because we are creating very simple construction, construction of society, relation between oppressors and oppressed people. And, in Russia, I don't know, in America, I think it's absolutely another situation, but in Russia, power very often looks like dark nature, unreasonable nature, and for primitive people, And this is why we can't struggle against this nature. But when you show, look, it functions like this, it's very simple. And it means that we can struggle against it. This is why.
I want to just keep moving through questions. I apologize. But before we go there, I just want to... Is there one up there?
Yeah.
Okay. That's our online community. Hey, let's give a round of applause to our online community.
There's a question from Emily F. Can eating in public and the Uristas talk a bit more about their background and relationship to broader social movements?
Excuse me?
Our connection to broader social movements.
I'm not expert on that, but I can tell you something I don't know. In our experience, when we started in Argentina to make our artistic politic project, nobody take care about that. Nobody called that is art. They say that is activism because we was involved with social movements. But in my understanding, this is the problem of the artists. The artists, they think they can create context. But no, we depend on the context. In a context of crisis, we can produce better or best works than in the context when nothing happened. So, I don't know, for me the important thing is try to make a real democratization of the art and put the art in the real place, because it's for everyone. It's not only for specialists. It's not only for this bubble of people. No? We meet always the same people and it's like a club, different hierarchies, but to change that we need to be strong in that way, and we must invite these social movements to participate and also to criticize our point of view.
And speaking for eating in public, I mean, Gay and I both come from, have a range of social movement experience. For me personally, I have been very active in no borders movements, which are arguing that states should not have the right to determine when people move, whether they move, how they move, what status they're given when they do move. We see migration as an act of resistance against global capitalism, and people who move as constituting a social movement that is escaping these relationships. So that no borders philosophy, I think, absolutely infiltrates every aspect of the work that Eating in Public does. It really has forced us to challenge this idea that the state will save us from global capitalism, when the state is so obviously complicit historically as well as now with global capitalism. You know, it's the states that sign international free trade agreements. It's the states that join the WTO. It's the states that put up borders and shoot people when they try and cross them or render them illegal once they get in. So the state does not save us. Is definitely that aspect of no borders philosophy is very much part of Eating in Public. And the idea, both Gay and I grew up in various ways in the 1980s identity politics movement. You know, we're women of color, we're lesbians of color, you know, on and on and on, right? And we both came to be very dissatisfied with that kind of identifications, and we came to understand that subjectivity was part of what maintains the systems that we're actually trying to fight. So in Eating in Public, we have taken on the identity of the diggers. And the diggers for us is an identity that is not rooted in these abstract, you know, categories of, you know, that are obviously completely false and completely imposed: race, nation, gender, sexuality, on and on and on. But the diggers is an identity that is rooted in practice, it is rooted in justice, it is rooted in the commons. So that experience of rejecting certain social movements that we came out of and finding ones that we thought were more liberatory was very, very important. And just the third thing I want to say is that we really also issue that whole local-global divide. We just do not see that we live on Oahu and that's it. All our projects are very local in that sense, but they are trying to understand that in today's world, the commons has to be global. I don't want to create a commons in Oahu that I'm going to set up borders around and then determine who belongs there and who doesn't belong there. I think that, so that kind of global sensibility, that internationalism, we used to call it. I was a red diaper baby, it's a confession. That internationalism that we called it is very much a part of Eating in Public's politics, and those are the movements we are connected with.
I also just want to, am I on?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate, it's closer. Okay. I mean, the biggest social movement, I wouldn't even call it the social movement that we're connected to. We're actually doing the same project. Nandita and I look very good for our age, but we've been doing this for over 400 years.
Just on the no border movement, just plugging Plausible Art World for a moment. This Tuesday, we'll be talking with Florian Schneider of the Kind.org network, which is, of course, the initiator of the Kind Menschlich Illegal, Nobody is Illegal movement, which is across Europe.
You want to get the question right here?
Hi. The Basecamp people, I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names, kind of brought up the issue of usage as a metric. They're using it as a metric. And when they said, when you took out the L, it really kind of like, well, that's the primary metric with words, is their usage. And then I think as the presentations progressed, it's like usage is a huge issue with the commons. Usage is relevant to everybody's presentation here. And so there's kind of like an obvious answer to my question, which is like, duh, usage and propaganda, and this is how you get this stuff done. This is how we transition from worlds or world to worlds, et cetera, just, you're on the floor and you do it. But beyond that and beyond, pushing for these new frameworks with media, et cetera, and these different ways that you're all doing, or like in the Eating in Public, emulating the state and other techniques, or the, I'll try to focus. Okay, so the question is, so beyond, using the metric of usage as really the most important part of getting this out into the world, beyond that, what else? Is there any wisdom in this group here, or that any other?
So what beyond usage, or usage to what ends?
Yeah.
All right. So usage to what ends? Why? For its sake? Why?
Well, no. The ends.
We're gonna have to just take it from there.
I'll just say a word about that. Probably everyone has a comment on that one, though.
No, Stephen, I was just going to say, ultimately, you're the only one I could think of that should talk about usership. Not the only one, but sort of champion of that term.
Well, the reason that I use it, I mentioned in my talk that it's an alternative regime of engagement to spectatorship, but it's also an alternative regime of engagement to ownership. It has that double advantage of breaking with those two venerable institutions of the mainstream art world, which people are apparently very dissatisfied with. Usership is a very interesting category because, and it's very slippery as well around activists, because usership is a form of engagement with goods and services, with objects and with actions, with other people, which is, because it's not based on ownership, it raises the question of use value and the rights of usage. And for example, as a drug user, I have a certain knowledge about drugs that a doctor who's informing legislators about whether that drug should be illegal or illegal simply doesn't possess. In other words, it's a cognitive privilege of a sort that a user has. The guy who, or the woman who has to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take the bus for an hour to work knows more about that bus line than the urban planner who works for the city. And so to that end, I think it's an extreme, obviously far beyond art worlds, but as a form of political subjectivity which has emerged over the past 15 years, which is often dismissed out of hand as being the same thing as consumership, but all too quickly, because obviously in a society where we consume, it's not exactly an insult to call someone a consumer. But usership has that third, spectatorship on the one hand is in opposition, ownership, and third to expert culture. And that's something I think which plausible art worlds stand very much in opposition to, is to cutting down that expert culture, which is often conflated with the nation of the mainstream art world, which is not the sort of world that we want a world in.
And on that note, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank you. Thank you. We want to thank a few things. We want to just let you know we've got a project, Creative Time's got a project coming up with the artist Mark Horowitz called The Advice of Strangers, where you can vote on this man's life for a month. We encourage you to check that out.
Starting November 1.
And we also want to really give a shout out to our tweeter and post-discussion moderator, Greg Chalette, in the back. I'll also give a plug for your book, Greg, Dark Matter, about all those other worlds that no one gives a lot of love to, but Greg does, and his show in Brooklyn. And Greg's also going to be doing a project with us called Artists on the News, where we're trying to get, and this will be an ongoing thing, where Creative Time's trying to get the voices you've heard today and yesterday into the main circuits of media publications around politics of our time. So we're looking forward to that. And listen, at the end, we need your feedback on the next year's summit. It's been great. I'm hoping you enjoyed it, and I hope it produces a lot of dialogue, because the goal is, of course, to get somewhere. Thanks.
And Nato and I just want to give another shout out to the incredible Creative Time team. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you interns and volunteers.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, the whole staff. Everyone works.
Foxy Development Force.